The year 2023 didn't exactly begin in the worst possible way, and that's some good news to be frank. But however, a lot of the same trends from last year followed us into this year, especially the declining trust in centralized platforms and mass migration to decentralized ones. And it's very clear that DeFi is going to be one of the biggest battlefields that will determine the ultimate fate of crypto. On this episode of the Money Panda, I explored this and much more with Iaos Barman, the CMO of the Unifi network. And it's safe to say we had an explosive conversation. So let's get into it, shall we?
Welcome to the Money Panda, hosted by Elvis Kolawole.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Money Panda podcast. This is the podcast where we tend to talk about Web3, crypto, and finance, and some of the most pressing issues in this space. Of course, it's been a really dramatic couple of months, a really dramatic quarter, in fact. And that's why today we're going to speak on the future of DeFi. This is a running series, and DeFi is pretty important for the future of the space. And that's why we are going to talk about DeFi with players in the DeFi space. And today I'm going to be speaking to Iaos Barman, the marketing manager at Unifi Protocol. So Iaos, would you mind telling the audience what you're about, what you work on within the DeFi space, and you work within the Web3 space generally?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thanks a million for having me on, Elvis. It's great to be here. So I've been in the space maybe since 2017. First fell in love with Bitcoin. And fell in love with the idea of self-sovereignty over your own money, and what that might mean for the future of the financial system. So from there, I started to learn about Ethereum and other decentralized protocols, and I knew that this was something that was going to be big, and I had to work in this area. So at the moment, I'm working for Unifi Protocol. We've had many decentralized products over the years. I work in marketing, which is my role would generally be based around creating growth strategies, company direction, and how to best navigate the space, especially in times like this.
Awesome.
So yeah, that is generally a bit about me, but a big fan of the space and everything it has achieved and will achieve over the years.
Awesome. So as a player in the space, you are in a very good place to talk about DeFi especially. So I would like you to tell the audience, especially those who are newer to the Web3 space or to the crypto space, what does DeFi or, decentralized finance actually offer that is not exactly there in the world of CeFi or traditional finance? How does it actually differ? Where is the actual value addition for DeFi?
Sure, good question. I will avoid going too technical. Obviously DeFi operates using smart contracts with no intermediaries.
Yeah.
But for me, the main difference between DeFi and traditional finance is access. Anybody in the world with an internet connection and a non-custodial wallet has access to the whole DeFi space. You can be in Guatemala and you have access to a brand new, fast-moving financial system, which is amazing. Whereas in traditional finance, historically, you might need to be based in a certain jurisdiction. You might need to have access to a broker with a very large amount of money to even get started and invest in that space. If you wanted to invest in a startup, you might have to be a registered accredited investor, and it's all about connections. Access is extremely limited and historically has been limited to a select few. DeFi changes that. It opens up a new financial system to the whole world, no matter where you are. So for me, the main difference between TradFi and DeFi is access, and that is the beauty of it. DeFi, differences to any application, which is great. But with CeFi, you have to KYC, which is know your customer, show ID, possibly show proof of address. And now in some cases, your job contract or your source of employment. So that can be limiting for many as well. But custody is the main one, right? Many of your listeners may have heard the terminology, not your keys, not your coins. If you have your funds on a centralized exchange, you are not in control of your funds. It's as simple as that. You might trust a centralized exchange, which is great. They might be good-hearted and there may be no issues there, but they are in custody of your funds. It is the same as the bank. Once your savings are in the bank has control over that money. You might think it'll always be there for you, but history has proven that sometimes that's not the case. When with DeFi and your non-custodial wallet, you are in control of your funds. You are in control of your money, and you are your own bank. CeFi doesn't really offer that, which we have seen evidence of recently.
Of course. So you mentioned a few things. For example, you mentioned inclusivity, which is very, very important. Because of course, like you said, these processes do actually exclude lots of people from different parts of the world. There are laws, jurisdictions that, separate people from services they so badly need, and DeFi fills this gap. And also, there's also the issue of custody. People can actually have control over their own funds, and as a result they probably could dictate their own future, because control of your own funds is essentially control of your own future, and that's a really big one. But then something critics tend to say is the reason why these laws do exist and these restrictions actually do exist is to try and protect customers, is to try protecting from fraud, is to try to also protect the financial systems from bad actors. So, I feel like off the top of my head, I could say, it's possible that DeFi might not necessarily be doing enough to protect users, and also the issue of security. When there's KYC processes and all these other processes, they do help to add an additional layer of security, which might not quite be there, as is evidenced by lots of hacks recently. So that being said, those are just some problems off the top of my head. So do you also consider these to be big problems? What other serious problems do you see in the world of DeFi today?
Yeah, you are certainly not wrong in what you have said, and I do agree to some extent, but I do believe it is a double-edged sword, and the idea that more regulation and KYC and more restrictions are really that helpful in the long term. Historically speaking, if you look at Bernie Madoff, the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, if you look at Enron, if you look at Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers in 2008, they were all heavily regulated institutions, and they got absolutely crushed, and lots of people lost money. It really destroyed the whole financial system as we know it, and we had to have the likes of the Federal Reserve and the ECB come in, print loads of money out of thin air and bail out those institutions, just so people were able to have access to their funds in the bank. So, traditional finance are a little bit hypocritical in that way, as is centralized finance, because although they like to create the narrative that regulation will solve these issues, there will always be bad actors. There will always be a way for bad actors to manipulate a certain system. And regulation has proven not to stop this from happening. So it is a double-edged sword, in my opinion. That being said, we do have problems in the DeFi space around these issues. We see anybody in the DeFi space has probably experienced a rug pull of some sort, which is very dangerous for users, and they lose a lot of their funds. We have an issue around sustainability, especially in DeFi. This was seen, protocols would come in, offer 10,000% APR, and within 6 months they're gone, and then users' funds are gone. So these are certainly issues in the DeFi space and in the decentralized system. For me, the solution is not more and harsher regulation. I believe the solution is better code, better auditing of that code, and more education. Many people first enter these systems and they don't really know what they are doing. They don't really have a good understanding of how these protocols operate. They see 10,000% yield and they might get lucky for a week and think they are geniuses. I was guilty of this myself when I first started, so everybody tends to go through this process, which is unfortunate. So education really needs to improve around the space. And I believe it's easy for me to say better code, better auditing, and better education. It's much more difficult to implement.
I think it takes time.
It takes time, exactly. But I think we will get there eventually. We are on the right path in this regard. More and more people are becoming aware, and education is improving. More and more coders from traditional finance are entering the space. So I think it is on an upward trajectory, and I would see those as the solutions to improve user security and to some extent usability versus harsher regulation, which a lot of people are calling for at the moment. Another issue I see with DeFi is it's funny. I will give two sides to this argument, right? I see the lack of decentralization as an issue.
Oh my God. I was hoping you were going to say that. I was hoping you were going to say that, but continue. Just continue.
Oh, good. I'm glad we are on the same page, because there are many that are not on the same page in this regard. But, in recent times, we have seen transactions on Ethereum being censored due to OFAC sanctions. We have seen MetaMask announcing that Infura, a third-party company, are tracking people's IP addresses and their wallet addresses. We have Uniswap, who I've always used in the past. I think they're a very good protocol, or at least have been, announcing that they are tracking data. And, DeFi and Web3 in its purest form was about you being in control of your data, whether that be your funds, your IP address, your wallet address, that no centralized authority or other authority will be collecting this data. This is going against the essence of decentralization. So for me, that is a problem. And I believe they are doing this because of the threat of regulation, the threat of government oversight. They know what's coming down the line. They don't want to get in trouble or be sanctioned themselves. So, I can understand it from that perspective a little bit, but the precedent that it sets is very dangerous.
Yeah.
So, it could be the end of decentralization as we knew it previously, or maybe not the end. Decentralization will always exist, but it could be a transformation of DeFi to a less decentralized avenue. I was listening. So for me, that is a net negative. It goes against why the space was originally created, why Bitcoin was originally created. And if the government tells you, okay, you have to do this, and you have then implement those changes. It is not decentralization. It is basically placing the centralized system onto the blockchain and replicating everything that we have experienced in the past. That is my worry. It's not that bad yet, but I feel it could head that direction. On the flip side, I think the opposite side to that argument, and I've listened to Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan and BNY Mellon and some major centralized institutions advocating for DeFi, saying they want to venture into this space, but they can't because there is no regulation. They want KYC to be implemented into the DeFi ecosystem, and to them that is still DeFi, and to a certain extent it would pump people's bags. It would make traditional institutions more welcoming to the space, but it is not DeFi. That is not DeFi. If you were KYCing to use a protocol, it is not decentralization in its purest form. And I worry about these aspects. What are your thoughts?
I think right now it's a case of we're kind of in the situation where like lots of other industries tended to be before. I think it's as a result of trying to pursue growth, because if like we were far more after, say, more organic growth, we would see people who understand these things as they are and who are willing to take the risks associated with the fact that, okay, you have full control of your assets, you have actual full responsibility. It's not like the general public is not necessarily used to using services where they have to bear all the responsibility themselves. Most people in the general public aren't quite built like that. But then we've tried in this space to try and expand quite rapidly. And then when you expand this rapidly, as we've done, and we also want to try to bring in the smart money, if you would call them that, or the institutional money, they come with the benefit and the sort of cultures that existed in TradFi, which is, protecting, if we'll call it that, protecting regular consumers and thinking the way regular consumers do. And regular consumers just want to be protected. They do not mind if some of their own power is taken away. They just want to be protected. But then for most of us who I'll call the people who believe in the Satoshi vision, yeah, that's really terrible, because that goes against the entire ethos of us actually like getting into this space. The CBDCs, all that is probably not for the best. And the thing, I feel the only real solution to that is probably to look for growth, that the kinds of growth that is more organic, and perhaps, just like Vitalik said, try to slow down the proliferation of institutional money, although that's a little bit rich coming from him, considering considering the sort of investors who are into Ethereum. But I think that's the big thing, because once they're involved, a lot of other things get involved too. Because like when you have like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of investments, you want certainties. The sorts of things that bring certainties are laws and like limits on what can be done, or like some sorts of consequences if, say, bad actors get in the way, if some things happen. And that's what huge, multi-billion-dollar corporations like believe in. But then that's not exactly the ethos of this space. So I feel we need less of that. And then, of course, we need, more of us speaking to regulators, and not the C5 people. I mean, with all due respect, not the likes of SBF or, people from centralized exchanges speaking on our behalf, So I think that's the solution going forward. And speaking of SBF, let me ask the very last question real quick. So what do you think could be the role of DeFi going forward? What I mean is, let's say centralized finance has put us in quite a lot of trouble. Say outside of the crypto world, in traditional equity markets and commodity markets, we're seeing lots of turmoil, and a lot of that is like affecting the broader economy. And even right here in crypto, CeFi is more or less putting us into more problems than solutions. So what role exactly do you think DeFi could play, say, in the next couple of quarters, or the next few years? So what do you think DeFi could do?
Like in this regard, and in this example with SBF and FTX and BlockFi and Celsius and Genesis and all of these institutions that are failing us, I think DeFi could play an absolutely pivotal role as a solution. The issue, well, one of the main issues with decentralized exchanges going bankrupt and users losing funds is that nobody knew what they were doing behind the scenes. Nobody knew that Alameda was investing in zombie companies, or offering loans that didn't really exist, and the whole thing was just an illusion. There was zero transparency. Now let's try and replicate FTX as a DeFi platform, with every single financial transaction visible on chain to the public. Number one, SBF probably wouldn't have been stupid enough to even try what he has done. But if he was, it would have been found out sooner by an on-chain analyst, and it would never have gotten as far. Users would not have lost half as much money. They would have been found out sooner, and it would have ended sooner. And that would have been the free market plus DeFi plus blockchain solving the issue, before it even got to that point. So the fact that DeFi offers complete on-chain transparency is, to me, the obvious solution to stop things like this from happening. I don't believe if FTX was a DeFi platform, they would have gotten away with what they have done. I really don't. DeFi offers complete transparency, and it's how you solve these issues, and that's what regulators should be looking at. That is the obvious solution: better code, better on-chain analysts, and constant auditing. Now, there is an argument that with a centralized exchange or an institution, some transactions have to happen off-chain, and it's not possible for every transaction to be on the blockchain. But okay, fair enough, but you can record every transaction on the blockchain. You can give a record of that transaction
Even
with
though
a traditional,
it's off-chain. Yeah.
Even though it's off-chain.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you give users a guarantee when they sign up that this will happen with every single transaction. I believe with actions like this, damage can be minimized. Now, and I believe that is the role that DeFi could play. Do I think that is going to be the solution to everything that we've seen recently? No, I think heavy regulation is coming, and that's how they are going to try and solve the system. Probably, like you said, because the crypto lobbyists are generally coming from a centralized exchange, or might have an ulterior motive, as we've seen with SBF, and you don't have like the likes of Eric Voorhees in Washington advocating on behalf of the crypto community and the crypto users and the OGs who've been around for 10 years. If they were the ones lobbying in Washington, like you said, we might have a better chance of DeFi heading this direction and solving these issues. But I believe it will be regulation that is brought in to at least try and solve these issues. What do you think? Do you think complete on-chain transparency could prevent things like this from happening? To a certain extent, obviously our space has some issues there, but for transparency purposes.
Yeah, I think the transparency helps. It will remove the incentive there, because something about secrecy, it's sort of, secrecy has its way of incentivizing bad behavior. You see it all the time in traditional finance, in Swiss banks and offshore havens. You see it all the time. We've seen that so many times. And then, like, when you know that that secrecy is not exactly there, it's not like people are quite smart. They will try to build systems to game,
Of
these
course.
these things. But of course, like you said, I do believe that's the first thing to do. But then, more importantly, like I said previously, I think it's quite important. I think I said it with, I think I said so to a founder earlier, that it could be good if the DeFi industry has some sort of association that does, set some standards. Aside from setting these standards, sensible standards that do keep our ethos, but try to keep users a bit more safe. If they could set some standards, such an association could be the one, lobbying and saying the right things to regulators, and not these, CFI players. But it's okay. It's okay. We could just watch out how the space plays out, and we'll see. We'll see if we actually get slapped with like way too much regulations in the coming months.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so thank you so much. So one last thing I forgot to mention, we do play a little game at the end of this podcast. So we have
I
just
was not aware of that. Okay, okay.
yeah. So we have just a few minutes left. So we do play a little game. So I mentioned a person that's very popular within the crypto space, and then you describe them with one word, just one word, just one word. So let's begin, okay? So the first
Okay.
person is Vitalik Buterin. So describe Vitalik with one word, just one word.
Genius.
Oh my God, I can't tell
I
you how
have
many.
other things. I have other things I do not like about Vitalik, but at the end of the day, he is a genius.
Absolutely. So okay, great. I think he's a genius as well. One more person, CZ of Binance.
Boss.
Oh, he really is the boss? Why is he the boss?
Yeah. Well, I think well, we were all watching what was happening between him and SBF in real time on Twitter, and he really showed who's boss at that time.
Yeah. I mean, allegedly he wasn't trying to like do any of that, but it sure as hell seems like that. But it's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. Okay. One more person, the last person, SBF. Could you describe SBF in one word?
It's like a fraud. Absolute fraud. There's a lot of words I could use to describe SBF that might not be suitable for your stream. So I'll go with
Yeah.
fraud and hope I don't get sued.
Yeah. Okay. Just one more person for good measure. Elon Musk. Describe Elon Musk with just one word.
Inspirational.
Wow. Okay, that's something.
Big fan.
Oh, so you're a huge Musk fan. Oh, cool. Nice. I do find him inspirational, lightning rod for controversy, influential, but yeah, quite inspirational as well. I'll give you that. So thank you so much. We've come to the end of this. I really appreciate your thoughts on the DeFi space. You really gave some insights here. And I really hope, we, as a space, DeFi understands it does have a real big role to play when it comes to like preserving the very principles that brought cryptocurrencies to life. Like DeFi has a really big role to play, and I hope like the entire industry is able to, come together and like find ways to like make this bear on the future of the space, and not allow more centralized forces or these problems we're having currently to weigh it down. So do you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I tend to agree with everything you said there, Elvis. And although some of what I have mentioned may seem not the most positive, I
Yeah.
do believe DeFi has an absolutely huge role to play in the future and will play a huge role in the future. The same for the space as a whole. Crypto is still growing at twice the speed of the internet. We are maybe halfway through a terrible bear market, but we will come back strong. This industry is not going anywhere, and it's an exciting time to be a part of it. So there is always a silver lining, and I'd like to thank you for having me on. Very enjoyable, and I hope we can do it again sometime soon.
Awesome. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do it again sometime. Don't worry, I'll be sure to reach out. So for everyone listening, this has been Iaos Barman, marketing manager at Unifi Protocol, and then we've been talking about the future of DeFi. And of course, if you're listening to this, there's every chance that you're also a fan of DeFi and you do want DeFi to succeed. And of course, we will look forward to what is going to happen in the next few quarters and also lend our voices towards all the initiatives that will push our space forward inevitably. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching, and see you on the very next one. Bye.